Today's episode of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast is brought to you by King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry, Bavarian Grill, and Ye Olde Butcher Shop. King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry, a longtime retail and repair shop for, you guessed it, clocks and jewelry. Everything from grandfather clocks to mantle clocks, wall clocks. Hey, if you just need to get the battery in your watch replaced, King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry has you covered. Not only that, they are also a gold and silver exchange. So if you have any gold coins, silver coins that you're looking to trade in for cash on the spot, King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry has you covered there as well. They are located at 1201 North Central Expressway, having served Plano for over 30 years. King Arthur Clocks and Jewelry. And now, let's podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch. I'm the sports editor at Star Local Media, and I am being joined by Taylor Ragland, who does sports for Plano, Allen, and Lake Cities, as well as Devin Hassan, who's the sports editor for the Mesquite News and the Rowlett Lakeshore Times. And gentlemen, let's talk some year in review. So we're recording this on Monday. This is, I guess, our first full day as a staff of, if you want to call it summer vacation mode or whatever passes for like a summer vacation in this line of work. All of our baseball and softball teams have played their final games. All 14 of our markets have been cleaned out, and there's just nothing to write about right now as school's out, and we're all in summer mode. So what we're going to do for this month, at least for the Monday editions of the podcast, is we're going to devote these next few weeks to looking back at the year that was for all 14 of our markets. We're going to find some way within these next 4 Monday podcasts to cram into kind of a year in review, a look back at all of our markets and just some of the standout moments from the schools that we've covered, just some overall impressions on the year that was for just these athletic programs that we have spent the last 9 months, just writing fervently about. So Devin, Taylor, with the two of y'all here, we're going to focus this first one on Devin, your 2 markets, Mesquite and Rowlett, as well as Plano. So Devin, let's just get right into it. Let's look at Rowlett and just the kind of the year that was between Rowlett, Sachse, obviously a school district that you've covered, for quite a while. Just when you look back at 2017-18 for those 2 schools, just what kind of jumps out at you?
Dominance and consistency.
Yep.
Sachse put together the 8 season-based sports. In other words, volleyball, football, girls and boys basketball, girls and boys soccer, baseball, softball. They wanted at least to share the district championship in 7 of those. Boys basketball being the lone exception, but in most of those were undefeated fashion. I mean, you look at their 4 girls teams, they lost a total of 3 district games between 4 sports.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was just a phenomenal year all around for them. The football team obviously making it 3 rounds deep for the first time ever. The girls basketball team making it to the state tournament for the first time in school history. That was really kind of the story of the year on that side, and I'll get more into that in a second.
Yeah.
But then you look at at Rowlett, that's the consistency. All 8 of their season-based teams made the playoffs for the 2nd straight year. No other Garland ISD team can say that. They earned a share of the district championship in volleyball, earned a share of the district championship in girls soccer. So again, even though they're finishing 2nd, 3rd, they're still making the playoffs, in every sport. And the last team that didn't make the playoffs from Rowlett was the girls basketball team back in 2016. So I mean, just across the board, they've just been a model of consistency.
They run that Garland ISD district.
Rowlett and Sachse, that's now granted, all things considered, they're the 2 biggest schools. They have the 2 biggest student bodies to pull from. It's not a big discrepancy. We're not talking Allen Wiley different here. I mean, they're all between 2,200 to 2,800.
There's a 3,000 student gap.
It's not like having an extra school to pull from. But that's kind of those are the 2 the fastest growing schools, and they've been the standard, and it's cyclical. There was a time a decade ago where Garland was kind of the standard bearer across the board as far as being a well-rounded program, but. As these 2 schools have grown and as they've kind of developed, and again, the consistency aspect comes from coaching as well. There are coaches at Rowlett, like Paul Common in baseball, that have been there since the school opened in 1996. Same with Sachse. Red Barons, the football coach, has been there since the start. Don McCullough, the girls basketball coach, has been there since the start. And they actually opened in 2002 as a junior varsity program. They didn't start playing varsity sports until 2004, but they have Chris Burrow, the baseball coach. They have several coaches that have been there since the program opened, and that kind of stability really helps build, especially when you're in Garland ISD. You have choice of school, which does factor into certain things. And having a coach that's been there and has their program, they have the feeder schools running the same system that they want. You can see the results play out what they do.
You mentioned just some of the high water moments of covering that school district, and Sachse girls basketball just top of mind with just the if you want to call it a magical run or just the I don't know how much of a surprise it was in hindsight, as they kind of flew under the radar at least a little bit during the regular season, and then just seemed to just take things up a notch. Just kind of reflect on what that was like now in hindsight, kind of going through and covering that team and watching them do what they did.
Well, I think Garland ISD tends to, as far as Metroplex the Metroplex goes, they tend to fly under the radar anyway because there isn't a lot of history with them making state runs in any sport.
And you mentioned just like how lopsided a lot of those games were, and those teams are just traditionally, it's kind of always tough to gauge just how good they are when you're just running every team in your district out of the gym by 40 points. How much of it is you versus how much of it is just the district?
Yeah, and I think but I think when you look at you talk to somebody from the Houston area or from the Austin area and stuff, they think about Allen, they think about Plano, they maybe think about Marcus and those Louisville teams that have had a lot of success in other sports, South Lake Carroll type stuff. They didn't. When Sachse made it to the state tournament this year, I had people down in San Antonio ask me, where is Sachse? They had no clue what Sachse was. But you asked me, was it a surprise? Not really. I mean, this is a team that had that returned everybody from last season and coming off a good year. And they kind of, they had that memorable game against Hendrickson in the regional semifinals where they were down 20 points in the first quarter and come all the way back to win, and then obviously were able to follow that up the next day with a winner of Pflugerville to make it to the state tournament. But it was a team that that caught fire at the right time, but the talent was there, and they had every opportunity to beat Converse Judson. A Converse Judson team that I watched take Plano down to the very end. And so I think Sachse kind of sits there and thinks, man, a bouncer, one bounce here, one bounce there, and we're the state champions. They certainly had that potential, and they proved it in the court. And when you look at it, Avery Krause, Kayla Demas, Jayla Brooks, Tia Harvey, Adhel Tack, their entire starting five is all back next year. So that's going to be, they're not going to be flying under the radar next year. They will not. They will probably be ranked in the top 5. If not, maybe, I don't know.
You can make a case, though.
The defending champions should be ranked number 1.
But they do lose a lot. I mean, Sachse is in a far better position entering next season than Plano will be.
They are, and they also have that experience. And I know, talking to them after the game, it's always heartbreaking anytime a season ends, but especially in a game where you could have won, and I know they feel like they should have won. They're going to use that as motivation next year.
I guess the Sachse football team was another just major story with that team, just kind of just bursting onto and they were ranked fairly high just about all season. The AP had them in the top 10 just about all year, and they made headlines for a variety of reasons, whether it was for the dominance on the field, whether it was
their music.
What was it? It was just one track, just
the Sachse U rap.
The Sachse U rap. That was like 3 or 4 of the players. Coined that genius bit of auditory gold, and there was obviously the high water year just in Sachse's history, their deepest playoff run ever. Just kind of recount just that season and just what that was like.
Well, it was an interesting year because they just crushed everybody. Early on. I mean, they're scoring 60, 70 points, and that was what their song was about, was the fact that their starters are always sitting in the second half, which a little cocky maybe, but
absolutely. There's not a little. If you got players putting out a rap song bragging about your dominance, that is some next level braggadocio.
But they went through, and again they had the one big challenge in the regular season when Rowlett jumped on them. I mean, they took their best punch, and Rowlett was actually up 14 points in the fourth quarter. Sachse, they had to dig deep for the first time all year long, and they were able to rally. Jalen Maiden scored, rushed for a touchdown in the final minute, so they could pull out a 42-35 win. And, I think that game actually helped them immensely when they got to the playoffs, because the playoffs were a whole different animal.
Oh, yeah.
And they were fine in the first round against Lake Highlands, but then they played a Rockwall team that came out of a really tough district in 11-6A and knocked off the Woodlands. Everybody thought the Sachse and the Woodlands was going to be one of the premier area round matchups in the state.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden Rockwall comes in as essentially the 4th seed, I think, out of 11-6A.
That's what I was just thinking, yeah.
And knocks off the Woodlands, and they had Sachse on the ropes. They're up by a touchdown late in the 4th quarter. Jalen Maiden leads them down the field. They scored the tying touchdown. Come out, they go to overtime. He hits Jackson up in the middle for a touchdown pass, and then they had that big goal line stand where they were able to hold twice from the 1 yard line to pull out the wind. And then they go into the next round, and the road came to end because of Pflugerville-Henderson. But that was another interesting game because Pflugerville-Henderson was up 42-14 in the 4th quarter with 8 minutes left. And, you think, okay, well, now what are you going to do? Well, I think they kind of showed their resolve. They showed their resiliency. They made a charge, got back to 42-35. Ultimately, it was not meant to be. But, that was it. And I talked to Coach Behrens about this, after the spring game last week. And he said, no, that team raised the bar. He said, every team's different. Every group of kids is different. He said, but now they have that to shoot for. It's 3 rounds deep. Their ultimate goal is to win a state championship. So they're in no way satisfied. But it's a series of steps, and they took the next step last year.
I guess, yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add on like the Rowlett side, or just anything else that kind of jumped out within that market for the season, or?
No, like I say, it's just Rowlett. I mentioned the word consistency earlier. Again, across the board, I'm really, if I had to look at a Rowlett team that I'm really interested in next year, that jumps out is the boys soccer team. Kevin Adolfo, who was the district most valuable player this year, scored 20 goals, only a sophomore. And you start looking down their list, they have made the playoffs every year, I believe, since 2000. And they had to rally late in the district season to make it this year. But then you look at their roster, and it's sophomore. And that's been a program that I've always thought was capable of making. They've made a couple of really nice playoff runs over the years, but that was one of those teams, those programs I've always thought was capable of making a run at a state championship. I'm not sitting there saying they're going to make a run at a state championship, but I think what they had coming back, they have a bona fide star in Kevin Adolfo. I think that's a team next year to kind of really keep an eye on as one that could make a run at the state tournament.
Interesting. So then let's transition then to Plano. Let's give you a chance to catch your breath, Devin. We're digging into Mesquite with Taylor. You and I, you tagged along. You came on board. Was right in the middle of the basketball playoffs.
Yeah, I think the first game. This wasn't Plano related, but I think the first game I covered here was Allen Duncanville.
That sounds right.
Basketball,
that sounds about right.
So yeah, right around then.
So you got to see about maybe the back third, half or whatnot of the Plano ISD athletics school year. I guess a quick snapshot of what happened in Plano. In Plano ISD athletics this year, you had one state champion as far as the major team sports go. That being Plano Senior girls basketball. Within the how did you refer to it? Just season sports? Because I've always wondered
the terminology I've bandied about, but I just say season-based sports.
Season sports, bracket sports I've used in the past. Like the volleyball, football, soccers, basketballs, baseball, softball. Plano ISD had 3 district champions across those 8 sports. You had Plano West volleyball, which was kind of a surprise at the time because I remember your predecessor Tim Glaze. He, Coach Bridge told Tim beforehand that the expectation heading into last season might have been it was almost like a rebuilding year because they graduated with such a talented senior class, and that team just hauled off in one district, went 3 rounds deep, and that's if you want to rebuild yourself from a playoff contender into a district champion. I guess that's what Plano West did in volleyball last year. Obviously, the aforementioned Plano girls basketball team. They won district as well, and then Plano softball team, which which just concluded their season on Friday with a trip to the state semifinals. They too won District 6A. As far as the the solo sports, what have you, they were district champions for East girls cross country, Plano girls track, Plano West boys golf, and Plano West tennis. I guess kind of looking back at this. this school year as a whole, like we just, spent a lot of time talking about the Sachse girls basketball team and what they were able to accomplish. And, had they been able to get past Judson, it would have been a matchup with Plano Senior, a team that was, making the trip to state. They ended up winning the 6A state championship, their first one ever. And that was, of all the teams that, I covered last year, that's just the run that really kind of jumps out, just because of, it was a team that, I've said this before, but going into the season, you knew the potential was there. It's going to be a situation very similar to what Sachse has working in its favor, where Plano had its entire team back. I mean, they did not, that's not kidding, like they did not graduate a single player from their team the year before. So you had that kind of chemistry, that kind of continuity, and they were a team that already had, a really impressive intangible over most opponents, and that was just their collective size and length, and just how well that they played together on the defensive end. And you knew that the potential was there for them to, to potentially get on a roll and do something special, but it's Region 1. You know that, for covering, if you've covered girls basketball in Texas, you understand that Region 1 largely goes through Duncanville, as is
always
the case every year. It always goes through Duncanville. They're the juggernaut perennial powerhouse. No matter how up or down they might seem, like that if you get to the regional tournament, chances are you're going to see them there. And that was, of all the games that, first off, Plano's playoff run was, it was just a murderer's row. Even like as early as their first round matchup against LD Bell, who was the 4 seed out of 5-6A, that team still had one of the top, sophomores in the country, in Myra Gordon, and she gave them all they could handle. She had 37 points I think in that game, and that game was one that Plano only won that game by 7 just because Gordon was just that dominant. So it was a game that even in the first round, there was no resting easy. And then they had the double overtime game against DeSoto, which was, that'll be when I go back at the end of the year and recount the five best games that I covered. That's for sure getting on there. That had the crazy buzzer-beating 3 by I forget the girl on DeSoto who hit that shot, but to force overtime. You had the sequence where actually that was set up beforehand by, Plano's Sophie Flighty was at the free throw line. She makes the first free throw on a 1-and-1, and then on the second free throw, she missed the shot, but one of Plano's cheerleaders had stepped onto the court, and the refs blew the free throw dead before the shot went down.
Oh man!
And then Flighty's made the makeup free throw, and then DeSoto went down to hit the 3 that tied it and sent it in overtime. So you think of just the little breaks here and there. I've always said, regardless of the sport, you have to get a little bit lucky along the way in order to win a championship at any level, whether it's high school, college, even what you're seeing in the NBA Finals. You have to get a little bit lucky to win a championship.
Playing against J.R. Smith.
Yeah. Then they turn right around and beat Cedar Hill, another team from that juggernaut 7-6A district. And then they were able to build up to that regional finals game against Duncanville, and it was shocking just watching kind of the score was the final score was 60-48 Plano, and it was a game that at the time felt like you just don't see a team take it to Duncanville quite like that, because as this game went along, it was this didn't feel like an upset anymore. This wasn't like Plano was just catching some fortunate breaks and whatnot. It felt like all those attributes that you usually equate with Duncanville, size, IQ, defense, pressure. Plano was the one who was out Duncanville, for the lack of a better term, and then they were able to turn that around. And you saw this, Devin. You were covering them down at State, and just the job that they did in that title game against Judson, being, what was it, a double-digit deficit in the second half?
Yeah, they were down 10. I want to say 10. It may have been 11, but yeah, they were on their heels. And it obviously gets a very, very good Conference Judson team, and they dug deep. I think they obviously, we kind of threw out, and it sounds cliche, battle tested, but it does make a difference when you go to a tough district, and especially when, like you say, they went through that gauntlet of teams through Region 1. You can call on that experience, and I think you saw that in the second half of the state championship game. That's why they, lifted the trophy. It
was, they kept the essentially the same starting 5 over the back half of district through the playoffs, and it was a team that everybody kind of knew their role, and they just played so freaking well together. Whether it was the seniors like Katie Farrell, Anna Halverson, and Sophie Flighty's, Jordan Merritt, who just looks like she could become one of these special girls basketball players just in Plano ISD, just in general, and Zaria Collins, who really went so the big kind of plot line over the second half of the season season and through the first few rounds of the playoffs was Plano not having Lolo Davenport, who was out for 6 weeks. Zaria Collins was called upon to kind of fill that role as far as take on those minutes. Merritt had to do a bit more scoring, but you realize just watching throughout the playoff just what a pivotal part Zaria Collins played for that team on both ends of the floor, doing a lot of the dirty work, the rebounding, the hustle, the defense. That was who they put on like the other team's best perimeter player. Was they just sick Zaria Collins on her, and she did a great job guarding some of the top players in the state for that matter. So then you get to the fourth round of the playoffs when Davenport's back, and they brought her off the bench, and all of a sudden you've got a player that can put up 20 a night coming off your bench, and that just took Plano's ceiling to a whole new level.
Well, she was the most outstanding player in the state championship game. I think when you have how often do you have your sixth man, quote unquote? I know it's not an ordinary sixth man because the circumstances, but how often has that ever happened that the most outstanding player of a state championship game is someone that didn't even start the game?
And it was just a nice just moment of redemption for her, because I know she obviously felt bad for having to miss all that time, and she was able to just give that team, like I said, if nothing else, it just heightens their margin for error and just allows you to, when you have the luxury of being able to turn to a player that can get you double digits just like that off your bench. That is just such it's a weapon that starting the postseason, I think you weren't really sure what role she would play, if they'd even make it far enough for her to come back, and then once she did, it was night and day just how much better it made the team. And obviously it culminated in them winning their first ever state title. They wound up being ranked number 11 in the country by Max Preps. Max Preps swung by to have this big old ceremony, big old assembly at the school when they unveiled their banner. They were ranked number 11 in the country. Just one of these special basketball teams in Plano ISD history. And then and that kind of triggered a run of Plano ISD, Plano Senior girls athletics for that matter, just had a banner back half of the year between what the girls basketball team did, what happened with the track team winning their first district championship in forever, and then parlaying that into a really strong turnout at state, 5th place overall. I want to say that might be their highest finish ever. But you had like Kennedy Blackman winning the 400 and getting second in the 200, and Ashlyn Hilliard, I think she got bronze in the 3200 now that I think about it. And then you take that momentum, and then the softball team, which won 6-6A, and then got hot and advanced all the way to the state semifinals, and had their own little Duncanville-esque upset along the way when they took down Keller in the regional finals 2-1. And that was, I got to see their final game over the season. Just again, one of the special teams that I got to cover. Just a real fun team to be around. All those kids have such great personalities. You can really see just how connected they all were throughout the season. And a team that had a home run punch like none that I've covered. They hit as of Friday state semifinal. Lindsay Edwards hit a home run, which no small feat. She hit a home run over the scoreboard at UT in center field, cleared a college ballpark, and then took out the windshield in a pickup truck that was parked just a few feet outside. Just an absolute moonshot, and that was a kind of a nice summation of Plano's of their offense as a whole. They in the playoffs alone, they hit 13 home runs. You don't see, some teams go an entire season without hitting 13 home runs, and Plano did it in one playoff run. And not only that, they had those 13 home runs spread across 8 different players. So only one player in the starting lineup did not hit a home run in the postseason. So, just a really impressive run that, that Plano got on. Just their second ever trip to state. Just fell a couple runs short. Although it wasn't all for naught, the team that beat them at Atascocita wound up winning the state title the following day by beating Canyon. But then, I guess, Taylor, we can give you a chance. I'm running out of breath right now. But so with, just in the time that, kind of from the middle of the girls basketball playoffs through to this point, just kind of what have your impressions been kind of on this the first half year, I guess, of covering Plano ISD athletics?
You already talked about Plano softball. That was obviously a huge one. It was more your beat, and you were out there, but I got to see them close the season against East, and they were impressive. Obviously you've already kind of said a lot on them, but they were very impressive. Golf around the district was impressive. The Plano West boys team, which is always good, continued to be good. Made state as a team and didn't do super well at state, but just consistent as always. The Cootie brothers in their final year were very consistent and very good before they head off to UT this fall. And then Libby Winans, obviously, for Plano East, winning the girls' 6A state championship in golf was a huge deal. Tommy Boone for Plano Senior, got bronze at the 6A boys tournament. So golf all around was a fun sport to cover and a lot of success for PISD in particular. Baseball, the sport of my past, I guess, that I really enjoyed covering. None of the Plano schools were, blow you away good. West had a really good year after a tough fall, making the playoffs, getting back to playoffs, and losing to eventual regional finalist,
finalist
Marcus. So,
and they took a game off Marcus too.
Yes, they did. Yeah. Jack.
The greatness of Jack Hattrup.
Jack Hattrup took a game off Marcus. That guy is very good. We'll be back for Plano West, so potentially another solid year next year. They're losing some stuff in the middle of their lineup, but a good year for Plano West baseball and a good building year, I think. Plano East had a down year in baseball. Plano currently stuck in that 4th seed, it seems like, which just
and really, they tied for second place.
Really bad luck.
Even when they tie for second, they're still 4th.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it bad luck, or you could call it. I mean, they did have a seeding tournament where they lost to West, but still to tie for second place and then end up again in that 4th seed.
The injury bug bit them at the wrong time.
Is rough, but. Yeah, that was kind of my impression of PISD baseball. Not a super great year, but West had a solid year, and I think there's a foundation for all 3 of those programs to have better years as they transition to 9-6A. But yeah, golf, funnily enough, was, I think, probably the most intriguing sport I covered from a PISD standpoint.
The month of May was, we've already talked about the softball team and, what happened in track and then girls golf. There was Plano ISD just had a run of excellence that I'm not sure how many months PISD as a whole has had better than last month, because you had Kennedy Blackman, winning state in the 400, Plano Senior girls getting 5th at state track. Then you had 1 week later Plano West tennis, Emma Jenner and JoJo Tai winning the girls doubles bracket at the 6A state tournament, and then just a few days later was when Libby Winans won the individual 6A state title in girls golf. So in that span, you have individual state
plus
champions.
Tommy Boone, too.
Tommy Boone.
Tommy Boone gets bronze at state and gets he's like the odd man out. He's the guy that didn't perform.
You've got medalists, including 3 golds, for all 3 PISD schools, and then you had Plano Senior softball. You were in the midst of their tie their deepest playoff run ever. I mean, what a month of May for Plano ISD. Really finished on a high note. Just kind of looking at the school year as a whole. Like I said, it started off with some some surprises in the fall. You had, like I said, the West volleyball team, kind of at least by their expectation, coming out of nowhere and winning 6-6A. Then you had almost like utter disaster in football because almost for the first time ever, all 3 Plano ISD schools missed the playoffs, and it wasn't until the last night of the regular season when Plano Senior was able to just eke out a win over Plano East to get that last playoff spot in 6-6A. And in a game that that was a great game too to cover, because it came right down to, because you knew the result, because there was this is the case for a lot of these tiebreakers. There's 2 or 3 other results that have to work in some fashion, but it became known about midway through the 3rd quarter that the result of the McKinney-Boyd game and the Allen Wiley game had enabled it to where if Plano had lost that game, then all 3 PISD schools would miss the playoffs, which when you got the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th largest high schools in the state and you miss the state's most visible sport at the high school level, that's a tough one, to put it mildly. But yeah, Plano Senior was able to, despite Plano East, pulling within 3 points and then recovering an onside kick inside the final minute. I want to say Plano was able to hold them off and come away with the win, and they actually wound up being very competitive with eventual state quarterfinalist Euless Trinity in the bi-district round. And then, like I said, then things kind of reached that apex with the run that the girls basketball team got on for Plano. And then, just really kind of hit a really impressive month of May for PISD. Other things at the, Plano West Tennis continued its run of excellence. They made their 16th appearance at the state tournament this past season, their 8th consecutive. They advanced to the state semifinals, although they did have a pretty hefty streak fall by the wayside in September when Allen beat them in district play, and that snapped a run of 144 consecutive district matches won for for Plano West. Plano West would avenge that loss both in the district seeding tournament and then later on in the regional finals. But yes, just another notable year on the tennis court for what has been Plano ISD's most consistent athletics program overall. Just year in, year out, it's death taxes in Plano West tennis getting to state. A couple notes on just the private school level. We still do cover Prestonwood Christian, John Paul II. JP2 snapped a 33-game losing streak in its second game of the season on a last-second touchdown to beat Frisco Legacy Christian 28-24. They went 1,406 days between wins. So that was just a cool moment for JP2 to finally get back in the win column. It was their first year under head coach George Teague, former Dallas Cowboy, and they showed definite signs of progress. Whether it was winning, they did win 2 games last season. They did follow up that win against Frisco Legacy with the win over, I believe it was Arlington Grace Prep, and so there's at least the foundation has been laid there for them to climb out of that. Still got to get that elusive district win. I know that's a streak that dates back for a while.
How many days is that?
It's I don't want to count, but but yeah, JP2 still very much on the come up. You had Prestonwood Christian winning its 5th state title in football in what was, I think, pound for pound the best game that I did cover last year. That was an absolute thriller down in Waco against Houston St. Pius, a game where Prestonwood erased an 18-point deficit in the second half. And won 42-41, scored the final 19 points. Some clutch plays made by a quarterback, Wiley Green, running back Josh Cunningham. Just strong stuff by Prestonwood in a game where it was just some of the most impressive taps football that I had seen in years. Watching them and St. Pius just trade haymakers for most of that game. 2 very, very good teams. Then you had a bit of a bittersweet finish for the boys basketball team. They did make it to state once again, but they did have their run of 6 consecutive state championships snapped in the state semis by Concordia Lutheran. That's a cursory look at Plano ISD. What a year! Never a dull moment covering Plano ISD athletics, for sure. So we'll pick things up in a moment. Take a look at Mesquite and just what happened out east in that neck of the woods after a word, I should say, from the sponsor.
Today's Student Athlete Spotlight is brought to you by Bavarian Grill, authentic Bavarian food and beer garden. Listed by the Zagat survey as the highest rated German restaurant in Texas for 12 years in a row. 12 years! That's 3 presidential terms. You can enjoy traditional and authentic spring favorites now, everything from appetizers like slow roasted ham hock and potato pancakes to entrees like bratwurst or breaded schnitzel. Bring your whole family for lunch and dinner. They are open Tuesday through Saturday, located off Parker and Highway 75 in Plano. Bavarian Grill. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
And let's pick things back up with a quick look at Mesquite. Well, I don't know if it's a quick look, as much detail as you want to go into, Devin. We got all the time in the world. So same line of logic with as we were talking about Rowlett. When you look back at this school year from Mesquite ISD, what jumps out at you?
It was one of those. I think it just shows kind of the overall quality of the districts they compete in. Because you look at it across the board, they didn't have anybody go further than 3 rounds deep in any sport, all the way across the board. And I just think that a lot of that is the fact that you look at the 6A district, 11 6A, and the 2 Rockwall schools are so well rounded. Longview, Tyler Lee, John Tyler may not be as consistent across the board, but they have strong teams in certain sports. And so there was a lot of times over the course of the year where, even most recently in baseball and softball, where you basically had the 3 Mesquite schools fighting for that one playoff spot. And then, you look, we've talked a lot over the last couple of years about 5A versus 6A and how difficult that is across the board. Yeah. Well, 11-6A and 12-6A somewhat gets overlooked, but when you have to go to 12-6A with the Woodlands, with the Conroe schools, with Lufkin, that's a lot of quality teams over there. And so, I sit there and I'm not trying to diminish anything when I say, no team made it further than 3 rounds deep, but it's such a gauntlet just to make the playoffs, and then that first round matchup sometimes is worthy of a 4th or 5th round type situation. So, and you look at the 15-5A as well with Poteet and West Mesquite. Highland Park's in that district, or what it has been in that district. Wiley East is good across the board. Lovejoy's phenomenal across the board. Roy City is an up-and-coming program. Forney, we just saw what the Forney baseball and softball teams did here, in the last few weeks. North Forney is good across the board, and then you run into some of those 16 5A teams, with Texas High and Hallsville and it's a really difficult bracket to come out of. Mm-hmm. So even if you just made the area finals, that's a big accomplishment. For sure. If you take things in the right perspective.
As far as just any standout teams, obviously, nobody made any sizable, massive playoff runs, but there were still some quality teams that you covered.
Yeah, and we alluded this on the podcast last week. The Horn football team. Yeah. Not just winning the district championship, but going undefeated, taking apart a very good Longview team, and just being able to withstand the challenge week to week, because that's a district where there was not really any pushovers. There's a couple games were easier than others, but when you have to run the gauntlet with Tyler Lee and John Tyler and Longview and Rockwall Heath, to go through that undefeated was a pretty big accomplishment. Interested to see how Jermaine Givens can, their outstanding dual threat quarterback, what he does for an encore after accounting for nearly 4,000 yards and 49 touchdowns last year. So they're going to kind of come in. I talked to Coach Overton last week, and he said, we got the target on our chest, but hey, you know what? We don't have a problem with that. We're up for the challenge. The other team that kind of jumped out to me that I thought was a really nice story was the North Mesquite boys basketball team. They had not made the playoffs since 2008. They were always one of these. We're on the bubble. We're right there. They seem to finish in 5th place almost every season, and it comes out of those last couple of weeks, and they just finished out of the mix. But they have one of the best players I saw all year long, Jerry Caraway, their outstanding guard. He got hot late in the season, and the team just kind of rallied around that, and they just kind of came together. You looked at it 2 weeks into with 2 weeks left in the regular season, you go, okay, this needs to happen. All these dominoes had to fall, and when they started falling, North Mesquite was right there, and unlike in previous years when they had that one bad loss that kept them out of it, they were able to rally, and they beat Mesquite late in the season, a Mesquite team that had made, I think, 15 straight playoff appearances, and then they had a playing game, and North Mesquite ended up making it. So I was really happy for Coach P.J. Randall. He's a Mesquite ISD graduate who took over the North Mesquite program, and again, for a program that's been so close so many times, to see them finally break through I thought was a great situation.
You mentioned just the strength of the by-district opponents and whatnot. Are there any teams from Mesquite ISD that you think, if they had a more preferable draw in that first round, that you think might have been able to get hot and just kind of ran into a bit of bad luck in the playoffs, or?
Not necessarily. I think the teams you can't control who you draw in playoffs. The Mesquite boys soccer team went 3 rounds deep. They took care of their business. I thought the North Mesquite boys soccer team had a good chance to make a run too, and I think I think both teams are poised, especially North Mesquite next year, to make a run. But it's the luck of the draw. What are you going to do? I mean, you look at some of those Poteet and the West Mesquite boys soccer team recently, but especially Poteet boys and girls for the past 3 decades, essentially, are perennial playoff teams. But second round, who do you run into? Frisco schools. Prosper. Well, in the past, it's been Prosper. So, but you can't do anything about that. It's just, but you're going to have to beat those teams eventually. But I think that's where maybe the Mesquite ISD teams somewhat get overlooked from a statewide perspective, because they sit there and point and they go, well, they didn't make it out of the area round. Well, look who they played. I mean, these are teams that are I guess their overall quality is better than a first or second round exit, but sometimes you just run into the wrong opponent at the wrong time.
For sure. Let's see. Is there anything else you wanted to throw out there from Mesquite, or is that about it?
No, that's. I say, I think just talking to some of the coaches and whatnot, everything we mentioned things being cyclical. I think, especially in the spring sports, baseball and softball in particular, I think Mesquite ISD is on the verge of an uptick. This is their softball and baseball programs have had a lot of success. 10 years ago, Mesquite made it to a regional semifinal. Horn made it to a regional semifinal. Poteet's made it to the state tournament in softball twice. Poteet baseball's made it to the state tournament twice. Here recently, it's kind of a downswing. It's been, only one Mesquite ISD team, Horn, made the baseball playoffs this year, which was a nice breakthrough for Coach Rena Linebaugh, who used to play at Mesquite. And so they're kind of trending up. Mesquite, North Mesquite are trying to get things turned around. Poteet baseball was just kind of hard luck. They had six one-run losses in district, in a very good district with Forney and Holland Park in that group. And same thing with softball. Those teams have had a lot of success. And I just got the feeling from talking to the coaches over the course of the year, they're kind of saying, we're taking our lumps, but I think we got a good young nucleus coming back, and so I think especially that's what I'm kind of looking forward to next year, is to see if those baseball and softball teams from Mesquite ISD can get back to where they feel like they belong and where they've been in the past.
Yeah, they won't have to see the Woodlands Conroe district.
I know, we welcome back Colleen and Belton, so no shortage of miles.
Another stone's throw away for you travel-wise. So yeah, that's a look at Rowlett, Plano, and Mesquite, and just the year that was in high school sports for those markets. 3 down, 11 to go. We'll find a way to somehow tackle the rest of those markets within the coming weeks. Devin, Taylor, appreciate y'all for tagging along, folks. That's just about it for this edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast. Folks, enjoy the rest of your week. We will talk to y'all later.
Thanks again for checking out this edition of the Star Local Media Sports Podcast, brought to you by Yield Butcher Shop, a meat market and burger joint based in Plano. It's summertime, folks. The temperatures are going to start heating up, and what a better way to break into that summer heat than to break out the grill, do some barbecuing. Well, guess what? Yield Butcher Shop has you covered. They can help you with everything from catering, grilling, barbecuing, or any special occasion, serving the finest cuts of meat from everyday to exotics. They are located at 811 East 15th Street in Plano, open Tuesday through Saturday. A smoking good time since 1974, Ye Olde Butcher Shop.